Okay, welcome back. In this lecture, we're going to be talking about how to add numbers or add fractions together. So the first thing we're going to look at is the basics behind adding numbers that have the same sign together. So the rule that you want to follow essentially says that you want to add the absolute value of those numbers, and then you're going to apply the common sign to the solution. Well, one of the ways that I find it fairly easy to be able to add some numbers together is to go ahead and go old school and do it vertically. So you put the bigger number on top and the smaller number below. And then remember, when you add vertically, you look at the ones column first, the tens column second, the hundreds column third, and so on and so forth. So here I have 6 plus 3 gives me 9. And then I have 1 plus 0 gives me 1, thus making my answer 19. And since both numbers were positive, I do not have to include a sign. For the second one, notice that my numbers are both negative. So I want to make sure that I don't forget the negative sign when I write my solution. And again, I can set up a vertical addition. So the bigger number on top, smaller number on the bottom. So I have 7 plus 8 is going to give me a 15. Remember, vertical addition says the ones drops down, the tens moves over. So 1 plus 1 is going to give me a 2. And so here I have my negative. So my answer is going to be negative of 25. Okay. Now here I have decimals. Again, I can still do vertical addition. What you're doing with decimals is you are lining up the decimal points. That is the most important piece of the decimal addition, is that you line up those decimals the way that they're supposed to be. And then again, you still are going to add your numbers in your column. So here I have 4 plus 2, which gives me 6. I'm going to bring my decimal down, and then 7 plus 9 is going to give me a 16. Both of my numbers are positive, so my answer is 16.6. Now I also have a fraction. So remember, when you're dealing with fractions, you need to have a common denominator. Now you find that by looking at your two denominators and deciding what do they have that's in common with each other. And so you're going to look at the 8, and you're going to look at 4, and you're going to ask yourself, what are 8 and 4, how do they match? Well, I can turn a 4 into an 8. And so here, when we are looking at what that common denominator is, you're going to go with what your turn is. So my least common denominator in this case is going to be an 8. And then what we do is we look at, how do I turn 4 into 8? Well, I do that by multiplying by 2. So 2 times my 3/4 plus my 7/8. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply the top and bottom by 2. So 2 times 3 gives me 6. 2 times 4 is 8 plus my 7/8. So when I do that, remember, you're adding just across the top. So this is 6 plus 7, and then you keep the denominator the same. 6 plus 7 gives you 13/8. Both fractions were positive, therefore we're done. Alright, now in this case I have two absolute values, so you have to apply just the basic generic rule, and that rule says that no matter what goes in the absolute value, a positive comes out either way. So when I'm looking at the absolute value of 10, this is going to become a 10. My plus comes down. The absolute value of 4 is a 4. Again, if you want, you could add this vertically. Make sure that you keep the proper terms lined up. 4 plus 0 gives you 4. 1 plus 0 gives you 1. My signs are all going to be positive. Thus, I have 14. Now here, again, I have 2 negative signs. And so I am just simply going to look at 2/3 plus 4/5. And I'm going to ignore the negatives till the very end. Well, my least common denominator here is going to be 15. And the way I got that is 3 times 5. So in my first fraction, in order to get 15 on the bottom, I got to multiply the whole fraction by 5. And then to get 15 on the bottom of the other, I got to multiply the whole thing by 3. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. 3 times 2, or 5 times 2 is 10 over 15, plus 3 times 4 is 12 over 15. So we're going to go ahead and add that, and this is going to give us 22 over 15. Now remember, we started out with negatives, so I have to add my negative back in at the end, so I have negative 22 over 15 as the result. Now, another thing that we do is we can add numbers that have different signs. So the rule that we use here in general says that you are going to subtract the smaller from the larger, and then you're going to apply the sign of the larger term. And so, first and foremost, I have 11 plus negative 2. So I'm going to do 11 minus 2, which is going to give me 9. And then I have to apply the sign of my larger number. And so my larger number here is positive. Thus, my answer for this is just straight 9. I'm going to do the same for the other. I have 16 minus 7. And so here, when I'm talking about 16 minus 7, this is also going to give me 9. However, if you notice, my larger counterpart here is a negative, which means my solution for this problem is going to be a negative 9. Okay? This third problem is a problem that I would do in steps. So the first thing that I would do is I would look at just these first two terms. This is kind of opening up and heading towards order of operations. So I'd look at just these first two terms. And so again, it tells you that you're going to do 4 minus 3, which gives you 1. And you are going to hold on to the sign of the larger term, which is positive. And then the second thing you have to do is we now have to then do the whole thing. And so here, this then turns into us having the math statement 1 plus negative 8. So if we do that vertically, we're going to have 8 minus 1 gives me a 7. However, remember in the very beginning that my 8 here was negative. Therefore, my overall solution is a negative 7. Now here again, I need to apply the absolute value. So my negative 2 is going to become positive. So this becomes 2 plus a negative 5. So I'm going to do 5 minus 2. That gives me 3. I need to remember that this started out as a negative. So my overall answer here is going to be -3. Now here I have two fractions, okay? And so again, I have to first figure out a least common denominator. Between 2 and 4, that would be 4. So I have to ask myself, what do I do to my first fraction to get 4? Well, I have to multiply everything by 2. So this is going to be 2 times my 5/2, and then plus the 3/4. So this becomes 10/4 plus my 3/4. Okay. And so in this case, if you remember, the rule said you're going to do larger minus the smaller, and then you're going to apply the sign of the larger term. And so here I started out with a negative, which means this is ultimately negative. And so I'm going to do essentially subtraction. So I have 10 minus 3. In this case gives me a 7. However, my sign was negative, so this is a -7. So this is going to go into my numerator. So my overall solution is going to be -7/4. Okay. Now, from here, another way that we could have looked at this is that I have one single fraction that has -10 plus 3 all over 4, and then gotten to the same -7/4 as a result. There's a million and one ways to solve problems, and so however you see it the best is how you need to attack the situation. Now the last quick thing that I wanted to look at was a couple ideas of application problems. And so the first one states that a passenger boards an elevator 5 floors below the ground level. In this building, the ground floor is 0. So what we're talking about is that right here is going to be the ground floor. So if we talk about boarding an elevator 5 floors below ground floor, then that would mean that right here at -5, this would be where you would board the elevator. And it says ground floor is floor 0 and the floor above the ground floor is 1. Okay, so this is above ground floor. So we're looking at here, and this way is going to be above, which means from here down this direction is going to be below. It says the elevator goes up 8 floors before the passenger exits. At which floor did he exit out of? So if we're starting at floor 5, then the easiest thing to do is we can simply count up 8 floors. So this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So right here is where we are looking at your passenger exiting. So therefore my solution here is going to be floor 3. Okay. Now last but not least, the temperature at 2 a.m. was -17 degrees C. By 2 p.m. the temperature increased a total of 15 degrees. What is the temperature at 2 p.m.? So if we're thinking about that, one thing that we can look at would be a number chart. And so we are starting way down here at negative 17 degrees C, and this is 2 a.m. Now from this, we are going to count up 15 degrees. So we're going to start here, and we are going to move up to here. And we are going to add 15 degrees to find my solution. And so this right here is what we're looking for. So essentially what we're going to do is we've got 15 or 17 minus my 15. So 7 minus 5 gives me 2. And then remember, we're going to keep the sign of the larger term, which was negative. So therefore, the temperature was negative 2 degrees Celsius at 2 p.m. Okay. So that's everything you kind of need to know about jump-starting you in terms of adding numbers and adding fractions. So if you have any questions, please let me know. And if not, then make sure you always remember that math is bananas. So just keep smiling, ask tons of questions, and be sure to have lots of fun with your math. And as always, I'll see you next time.